been a while since I answered your travel questions, so I thought it would be fun to do this little Q&A to share some travel tips, travel hacks, and answer your questions about what it's honestly like to be a full-time travel content creator. Okay, Jen Adopts Buster asks, what do you always carry in your carry-on? Hey Jen. So a lot of the times we actually just fly carry-on only, so meaning that everything that we're bringing on a trip is in our carry-on bags. So typically when we do that, although we have checked bags on quite a few trips last year, but when we do fly carry-on only, we will typically bring, obviously, a carry-on roller suitcase, and then we will each have a full-size backpack, and then usually I also have a little fanny pack. So the suitcase is my carry-on, the backpack is my personal item, and then the fanny pack is honestly a little extra personal item that I am sneaking on. Technically, you're only supposed to have one, but I've only had a flight attendant hassle me about it one time, and then I just easily put the fanny pack in my backpack and it was all good. So in the carry-on suitcase itself, it basically has everything. So all of our clothes, sometimes the toiletries will be in there, sometimes I keep it in my backpack, just kind of depends on whether we have TSA pre-check or not. And then also any gear that's like not super valuable, so tripods and things like that will be in the carry-on suitcase. In my backpack, I have my laptop, my hard drives, I usually have at least a couple battery packs. I also recently got a big battery pack that you can actually use to charge up a laptop, which is super useful because, you know, the little ones don't quite work for that. I usually also have a travel blanket. Even if I don't use it on the plane, sometimes I like using it at the hotel because sometimes you'll find hotels where it's like the blanket is like too hot or too scratchy or something, and then I'd rather just use my own. Definitely a sleep mask and earplugs so that if I want to sleep on the plane, I'm not bothered by anyone, any loud screaming babies, any of that stuff. Obviously my phone, and also my second phone, which is what I shoot on. And of course, noise canceling headphones, because it is very important to keep yourself entertained on a flight. So I will either use those to watch something that I've downloaded on my phone, or I'll use the wire to plug into the in-flight entertainment system and, you know, watch a movie or something like that on the plane. Speaking of keeping yourself entertained on a flight, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Audible. So I have some big goals this year, both professionally and personally. And one of my all-time favorite books when it comes to goal setting and planning is The 12-Week Year. It's been a while since I read it, so I decided to revisit it this year. But I decided to use Audible to listen to the audiobook version, and I absolutely love the experience. The Audible app makes it so easy to listen anytime, anywhere, whether I'm on a plane, at the gym, or at home unloading the dishwasher. So no matter what genre you're into, whether it's business or personal development or celebrity memoirs, you're gonna find an incredible selection of titles on Audible. But Audible has more than just audiobooks. They have thousands of podcasts, and they also have their own Audible originals. As an Audible member, you can choose one title a month to keep from the entire catalog, including new releases and bestsellers. And new members can try Audible free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/topflightfamily or text topflightfamily to 500-500 to try Audible free for 30 days. And if you end up listening to the 12-week year, let me know what you think about it. Okay, Carlene asks how to balance travel with a busy social scene at home. Okay, I feel like Serge and the girls are gonna laugh when they see this question because Carlene, I am a raging introvert, so having too many social commitments is not a thing for me. No, really, I am very introverted. I don't go out that often. I have, you know, a handful of close friends and also, you know, a handful of like creator friends that I will go out and see sometimes. So for the most part, I'm very much a homebody. As an influencer, we also get invited to a lot of events locally in New York, and you will find me very, very, very rarely accepting an invitation because I generally don't enjoy events that much. I'm not very good at like networking in person. I'm definitely much more effective like behind my laptop, like nerding out, which is my natural mode. So unfortunately, I have no good tips for you. Okay, HD Alina asks, how do your kids get so much time off from school to take so many trips? So we actually started homeschooling our girls a couple of years ago. So we had actually planned to start homeschooling in the 2020-2021 school year. But of course, then the pandemic hit in early 2020. And so in some ways that plan started sooner than we expected. So the girls did finish up their final year of public school. So that was the last semester, was the spring of 2020. So they did that all online. And then after that, we transitioned into sort of homeschooling for real. But I've actually been a travel content creator since 2016. So the homeschooling thing is actually fairly new for us. Before then, our girls were enrolled in regular public school here in New York City, and we would just try as much as possible to schedule our travels around their school breaks and holidays, long weekends, summers. If you plan it right, you can actually get a lot of traveling done without even having to take any time away from school. school. Now, obviously, there were some trips we would be invited to where it was in the middle of a school week and it's not something that we could move around. Like, it was, especially if it's a group trip, it's already set. You can't really have them change the schedule to suit yours. But for the most part, we were able to manage with the girls still in school. So in 2018, 2019, I would say that we were starting to become much more in demand and we were getting many more invitations, and it definitely became a little bit hard to balance the two. Now, we were actually lucky because the girls' school was super understanding. They actually were really into the fact that we took the girls traveling around the world. Like, they were very supportive, very flexible with us. And even though we were traveling so much, we were still able to kind of stay right below the, there's kind of like an allotted number of days you can take off. That's like unexcused absences per year. So we managed to still stay right under that. But even with all that, I actually felt bad myself. I'm Asian, I respect authority figures, and to me it felt a little bit disrespectful to constantly be pulling the girls out of school to do something else. Again, the school was cool with it, the principal was cool with it, the teachers were understanding, but it didn't feel quite right to me. And so as things were kind of ramping up, I decided, let's try this homeschooling thing for a couple of years, see how it goes, and we can always change our minds later on. So far it's been cool. There's definitely pros and cons. I don't think this is something we'll be doing forever. And at a later point, I may make a video about that. But, it's definitely worked for us. Obviously, the flexibility is amazing. But yeah, that's why we are able to travel so much. But even if you can't, you can get a lot of traveling done just around school breaks and holidays. Okay, Vanessa asks, I know you do luxury travel, but will you ever do a bougie on a budget trip? Hey Vanessa, so yes, we are definitely a luxury travel family for the most part. So I actually feel like we did quite a few bougie on a budget trips last year as part of the 22 Cities project, because in 10 of the cities we were hosted obviously by the Four Seasons, which you probably saw if you were following along on the series. But for the other 12, we paid for our own hotels. And since we were doing such a great volume of cities, we obviously didn't have the budget to do a luxury hotel out of our own pocket in every single one of those 12 cities. So for example, the entire trip that we did to Italy was self-funded, and I think we did it on, wasn't like low budget, but within reason. So we went to Milan, Rome, and Venice, and in each of the cities we stayed at sort of like either budget or sort of moderate level hotels. We ate at like a variety of places. I think maybe there was like one fancy meal in there, but for the most part, we ate at, kind of little casual hole-in-the-wall spots, neighborhood spots, or sort of like, mid-priced, like regular price restaurants. None of the activities we did were particularly expensive. It was just like walking tours, cooking classes, little things like that that you can book easily on various platforms. I would say probably the biggest splurge was in Venice, the private water taxis that we took. We did that a few times, but honestly, that was only because we had so much trouble with the transport. I go into it in the Venice video, but basically we were staying a little bit away from Venice itself, and that just like caused so many headaches with getting around. If it wasn't for that, I think we probably would have done that like once, but instead, because we were so sick of dealing with like the ferry, which is essentially the equivalent of like taking the bus there, we ended up doing private water taxis, I think at least 3 different times, which is definitely more than we had planned for. But yeah, I would say that a good half of last year's trips were essentially bougie on a budget. Jason asks, what is your favorite destination within 6 hours flight of the East Coast that's good for family and young girls around the 5 to 10 age range? Thanks in advance. I'm trying to take my little princesses overseas for about a week's vacation this summer. Thank you. Hey Jason. So of course it all depends on like what kind of trip or what kind of vibe you're going for. If you're going for more of a beach vacation, a tropical feel, it's a no-brainer to go to the Caribbean or to Mexico. There are so many destinations within a 6-hour flight from the East Coast throughout the Caribbean and in Mexico. One thing I would caution you about is the summer is obviously hurricane season, so you do have to be careful about that. In terms of the Caribbean, if you want to avoid hurricanes, Aruba is usually a pretty safe bet because they're completely out of the hurricane belt just because of the way they're positioned geographically. So Aruba is probably one of the few islands in the Caribbean where you don't have to worry about any risk of getting caught in a hurricane. But even so, bad weather could also just affect your flight getting to or back from Aruba. So weather will still play a factor. Now, another possibility is, of course, to go to Europe because, from New York at least, a lot of countries in Western Europe are about a 6-hour flight from the East Coast of the US. So if you all like cities, you could certainly hit up some of the major cities in Europe, London, Paris, Brussels, Barcelona. Those are all good possibilities. But of course, you have to keep in mind that summers in Europe can be really, really busy. We went to Europe last summer in more of the early part of the summer, like late May, early June, and even that early in the season, it was pretty crazy. So if you want to go to Europe in the summer, expect large crowds. It's just kind of the way it is. But I did want to offer another possibility, which is to actually think about going up north to Canada. There's still a lot of Canada that we haven't explored, but some of our favorite cities are on the East Coast, so much less than a 6-hour flight. Montreal is obviously great. You have a little bit of that European, like French feel without actually leaving North America. Toronto is somewhere we go very often. My sister lives there, and also we just like the city. And one of our favorite trips in Canada actually was to Quebec City. And we went there, I think it was the summer of 2019 or 2018. And it was a really, really great experience. It's a beautiful city, especially in the summer. I think in the winter, I would be scared. But in the summer, it's really beautiful. There's a place called something like Quebec City Island. There's a little island sort of off of the city itself, and it's a really beautiful place. It is very green. There's a lot of like farms and like small producers of like really interesting like specific foods. Like I think there's a place that makes blackcurrant wine, and then there's a little vineyard associated with that. So a lot of great like nature and food to be had there. So Canada, technically overseas because it is a different country than the US, but that's something to consider. And if not, then Mexico and the Caribbean if you want beach vibes. Europe is always a great choice, but keep in mind it's going to be really crowded in the summer. So Colin asks, do you suffer from travel burnout? How do you refresh and reset? Absolutely, I suffer from travel burnout, and the whole family does. You know, we've come off of 2 very, very travel-intensive years. We visited 21 resorts in 2021, 22 cities in 2022, and I wish I could say I have some really great routine when it comes to like refreshing and reviving ourselves. But the reality is that between those trips, we would literally come back to our home in New York and just like crash and just be zombies and just completely decompress and not do anything and just stay home and veg out. But also I feel like that is not very healthy, right? It shouldn't be like, oh, you're on a trip and then you're just go, go, go. And then when you get home, you don't do anything. I mean, obviously I'm also doing work, but you know, in terms of like activities, we're not really doing anything. And part of that is honestly some habits that were formed during the pandemic that we need to break. In March of 2020, we obviously stopped traveling, and in New York City, things were really, really bad. So for the first 100 days, we literally didn't leave the house other than to get groceries. Then in the summer, we started experimenting with a couple of staycations here and there. And then in the fall of 2020, we decided to kind of dip our toes back in the water and try out travel again in a very safe way. And so we had booked a couple of resort trips and we kind of tried that out. But throughout 2020 and at least the first half of 2021, there were still really strict guidelines when it came to sort of like self-isolating when you came back from a trip. So we would basically travel for a week, come back home, self-isolate for 2 straight weeks, and then we would have just 1 week to be able to actually go out safely in New York and do things. And then the following week, most likely we would be off to another trip. Now the self-isolating guidelines kind of eased as 2021 went on, and so we were able to break that routine a bit. But in some ways, we kind of got used to that cycle of kind of being on a trip and then coming back and then not doing anything. And also at that time, obviously a lot of things in New York City were shut down. So all that to say, one of my big goals personally this year is to kind of reconnect with our home of New York City. Even though we never left New York, even at the height of the pandemic, we were right here in Brooklyn the whole time. It still feels like we've been a bit cut off from the city for the last few years. You know, first because we were self-isolating and a lot of things just weren't open, so everything was shut down. And then later on, because we were traveling so much and traveling so intensively that we were gone so much. And so it really does feel in a weird way as if we have somehow moved away from New York for like 3 years and are now only coming back and rediscovering it. And so one of the things that I really want to do this year is to really reconnect with the city. So one way we're planning to do that is to actually schedule a weekly date night, so just me and Serge going out on a date, and then also one weekly family date where we all go out together and do something as a family. Because the girls are right, it's not healthy for us to just like do fun stuff on a trip and then come back and like be like zombies and never do anything fun. It's not a healthy balance, right? So we're trying to bring back some of that balance and at the same time sort of rediscover our city and also at the same time share it with all of you. Keys to Success says, my wife and I are headed to Honolulu soon. What are some key things to see, eat, and experience while on the island? That sounds like an amazing trip. So we have only been to Honolulu and Oahu twice, so I am definitely not an expert, but I can share some of the things that we did that we really enjoyed. So personally, I would say say that one of the things I really encourage anyone visiting Hawaii to do is to take some kind of a tour that explains the history of Hawaii. Because I think that a lot of Americans, and I was one of them, I didn't know much about the history of Hawaii. A lot of us don't realize that Hawaii was a sovereign nation state. Like, it was its own country at one point, and it was essentially just stolen by the US. And so when you hear about how a lot of people in Hawaii feel about tourism, there's a lot of strong feelings. Hawaii does have a over-tourism problem. I think that's not a fact that anyone disputes. But there's definitely a mix of attitudes, right? Some locals are very against tourism. Some locals feel like, it's necessary for the economy. A lot of people kind of land somewhere in the middle where it's like, hey, we need some, but, we really wish that tourists would be more respectful. I think it's really important as a visitor to understand the history of Hawaii, so that when you go, it just gives you a different perspective. And I think automatically you're going to become a more respectful visitor by knowing the history and understanding where people are coming from. And we do have a vlog from our first visit to Oahu where I actually share some of that historical info. I'm obviously not a historian, but in that video, I do share a little bit of what I learned during that trip. You may find that video useful. So the first thing is definitely educate yourself. And then I would also say look for opportunities to be able to participate and learn about an aspect of Native Hawaiian culture. So two really memorable experiences we had. One was taking I guess it's called a canoe or an outrigger. It's sort of like a traditional sailing vessel that's modeled after what traditionally Polynesians used to use. So that was a really great experience, just kind of taking that into the ocean, learning about the ancient sort of wayfaring methods that Native Hawaiians had, that the Polynesians had. That whole aspect of Polynesian history is super fascinating. So that was really memorable, just kind of learning about the wayfaring aspect of the culture. And then another experience that we really appreciated was we participated in a traditional ocean blessing. I feel like I'm not going to be able to explain it well, but it's essentially sort of a blessing ceremony that you do by the ocean, and it very much ties into the importance of the ocean in Native Hawaiian culture and Polynesian culture. So those are a few things I would definitely recommend. And then moving on to more touristy things, I know a lot of people don't like Waikiki. I actually kind of like it. Maybe it's because I'm from a tropical urban environment. I grew up in Hong Kong, which is not necessarily a beach town, but it definitely also has that big city feel, but that is also warm and tropical. So I don't know, I kind of like Waikiki. Yes, there's a lot of chain stores and stuff like that, but I don't know, I think it has a nice vibe. It's somewhat reminiscent of Miami's South Beach, has its own flavor as well. Obviously, you can also go to the beach. The beach there is not very impressive. It's been eroded a lot over time, so there's just not a lot of sand. And the sand that is there, I've heard, is actually imported from California. But it is one of the iconic beaches of the world, mainly because of the massive role it played in sort of spreading the culture of surfing all over the world. And so I do think it's kind of an iconic experience to take a surf lesson in Waikiki. We actually never ended up doing that. We tried a couple times, it just didn't quite work out, but I feel like that would be a fun thing to do. And then when it comes to eating, man, the food in Hawaii is so good. I would say that we probably ate much more on the casual end than the high end. But basically my favorite things were just to go and find good plate lunches. So that's basically, typically it's sort of a meat dish with a couple of sides, often served in just a cardboard or a styrofoam box. But there's a lot of really famous plate lunch spots all around Honolulu, all around Oahu. So that's some of the best food we had. And then I also just enjoyed going into the ABC stores. So I guess those are sort of the equivalent of bodegas in New York City. It's sort of a convenience store where they sell a lot of prepared foods in addition to just various groceries, and then also a lot of souvenirs. So the quality of the food there isn't going to be at the level of the really good plate lunch spots throughout Oahu, for example. But it's going to be a solid meal, very affordable. I love spam musubi, which is a Hawaiian specialty. It is a layer of spam, usually over sushi rice. Sometimes there's some stuff in between. There might be egg or something like that, and then it's wrapped with seaweed. That is one of the most scrumptious things I've ever eaten. And I've had spam musubi now on all ends of the spectrum in terms of pricing and quality, and they're all delicious to me. So that's one of my favorite things to get from one of those stores. But there's such a variety of great food in Honolulu. I would say the plate lunches are a little bit more of a fusion. So it's local Hawaiian food, but it's a fusion of the various cultures that have come to the state over the years. But then you should also try traditional Hawaiian food. Trying some of those traditional dishes. Poi is sort of the infamous thing. It's made of, I think, taro roots, a purple kind of ranges from like a runny sauce to more of a mashed potato kind of consistency. But definitely try some traditional Hawaiian food. But also pretty much any kind of Asian food I had in Honolulu was excellent. Whether it was Japanese, Korean, Chinese, all really amazing. And then of course you gotta have shave ice when you go there. I think which spot to go to is a very highly personal choice. In our Oahu vlog, we do share some of the places we went to. But yeah, you can get all kinds of different flavors, different toppings, and it's just a delectable treat, especially when it's like really hot and humid out. Like it just feels so nice to be able to cool down with a shave ice. But yeah, Honolulu is definitely a vibe. Like we love it. We feel very grateful to have been able to go there twice now and to have made friends with quite a few locals, and we are also very grateful that they were willing to kind of like share some of their culture with us. But yeah, definitely learn your history. Remember that you are a guest in their home, and treat the place with the same kind of respect that you would hope from guests visiting your home. Meg says, oh hey Top Flight family, what has been your favorite and most expensive vacation versus your favorite cheapest vacation? Thanks. Hey Meg, so I would say probably the two most expensive vacations we've done have been the trips that we did to the Maldives and then also our safari in Kenya. So to be clear, for both of those trips, we were actually hosted by the resorts that we worked with. So while they were the most expensive overall, not all of that cost came directly out of our pocket. We did pay for part of the trip, but the accommodations were definitely covered. But yeah, I mean, those two trips were really incredible. And it's not surprising to me that those are also two of the videos that have performed the best on our channel, because they were just like life-changing, total bucket list type of trips that I honestly never dreamt that we would be able to do this early on, I guess, in our careers or in our lives as travelers. So we're super, super grateful for that. And then in terms of cheapest vacations, I guess I would say like indoor water parks would be among our cheapest vacations. Some of those days we've been hosted, and then some of them we've just paid out of pocket to go ourselves. But we're pretty lucky that here on the East Coast, we have quite a few really solid like indoor water parks within driving distance of New York City. And I think if you look at it as like a hotel stay, those rates are pretty high compared to like a hotel you could get in a city. But of course you get access to the water park, and there's usually arcades and a lot of other fun things to do. But I think in general, indoor water parks are a really good choice for families who want just like a simple getaway, right? There's probably gonna be one driving distance from you. It's a quick drive there. You can maybe, stay one night, or if you wanna really party, you can make it 2 nights. But I feel like they're pretty self-contained. You've got usually the water park, there's usually arcades, there's usually other activities. If you go in the summer, oftentimes there will be like outdoor things that you can do as well, like zip lining, or there may be also an outdoor water park in addition to the indoor water park. But the indoor aspect is of course great because you can go all year round. So even when there's snow on the ground, your kid could be barreling down a water slide and having a great time. So fun fact, actually some of the earliest videos on our channel to actually blow up were our reviews of indoor water parks. So for that reason too, they have a bit of a special place in my heart, because those videos were a way that a lot of our now regular viewers first discovered us. Okay, well, thank you to everyone who sent in your questions. It was really fun to just sit down and chat with you all for a change. We're really excited about this year's travel theme, which is extraordinary experiences. We are going to continue to bring you extraordinary experiences from all over the world, but we are now also mixing in some extraordinary experiences you can have right here in New York City. We're really excited to be on this journey of kind of rediscovering our home, and we're so happy that we can take you along with us as we do it. All right, thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.